Hi guys, here's your tutorial this week for Jewish practices, and today we are looking at the Shabbat or the Sabbath, which is the Jewish day of rest. Now remember, God makes covenants with people or agreements with people, and part of the agreement he makes with Moses involves obviously Moses following God's rules or mitzvot. There are 613 of them, and they include the 10 commandments. And one of those commandments is to remember the Sabbath, to keep it holy. The Jews call the Sabbath Shabbat. And so it's the physical sign of the covenant with Moses, and it's very important as it's one of the 10 commandments. It also is a reflection or reminder of the fact that God creates the world in 7 days, but he creates the world in 6 days and he rests on the 7th. So it's kind of showing respect to that idea that you work and then you rest, to reflect on what you've done and think about the week you just had. Now Shabbat starts at sundown on a Friday evening and ends when 3 stars are out on Saturday evening. So it starts on Friday and includes all of Saturday until the evening. Now the Shabbat forbids Jews from working, so the Torah says that the Jews should not work on the Shabbat. And now the Talmud then interprets that and says there are 39 areas of work, or 39 activities that are considered as work. And basically these are any kind of creative tasks that change or adapt your environment in any way. So that would include cooking food or driving or building a fire, for example. And for some Jews, they would interpret that, Orthodox Jews, would include even turning on a light, turning on the electricity, changing the environment that way. And so everything has to be prepared in advance for the Shabbat. Food will be prepared. Now in the modern world, this is quite easy because ovens have timers, so you can put food in the oven and they'll turn themselves on and they'll cook food. But before modern technology, of course, foods would have been prepared in advance and so on and so forth. Now the only thing that can override work or doing things on a Shabbat, of course, is Pikuach Nefesh, which is the saving life, and life becomes before rules. I think there's a quote that says the Shabbat has been given to you, not you to the Shabbat. So obviously if you're going to save a life or need to save life, that comes first. So the Shabbat begins on a Friday evening, no later than 18 minutes, it's quite specific, 18 minutes before the sun sets. So obviously in the winter that'll be earlier than the summer. And it's started by the woman of the house, and she lights 2 candles. She often covers her eyes as she's doing it and recites a blessing to welcome the Shabbat coming in. And the Shabbat revolves around a meal. So you may have seen that programme on television, Friday Night Meal, where the family meet every Friday night to have a meal. That's a Jewish family, and they meet every Friday night, and the programme is about the discussions they have at Friday Night Meal, Shabbat meal. Now before the meal takes place, the father of the house blesses the children and recites a Kaddish or a holy prayer over the wine to sanctify the wine that's going to be drunk. And there will be 2 special loaves at the Shabbat called challah loaves, and that's spelled C-H-A-L-A-H, C-H-A-L-A-H. And these loaves represent the bread that fell from the heavens when the Jews were walking through the wilderness for 40 years after escaping from slavery in Egypt, looking for the promised land, and they didn't have any food, and God provided his chosen people with food to sustain them. And this was called manna from heaven, the food dropped from heaven. And these 2 challah loaves represent that food. So this is a really joyous occasion, the Shabbat, and so songs will be sung and stories will be talked about Jewish religion and the Jewish history. And it's really quite a nice evening, it's a family get together. Now the next day, in the Orthodox tradition, the men only might attend the synagogue before returning for the meal on the Shabbat. Whereas in the Reformed tradition, maybe men and women and maybe the children might go to the synagogue, although it's more usual in the Orthodox tradition for the men to go to the synagogue before the Shabbat meal on the Friday night. Now on the Saturday morning, the family will go to the synagogue for Shabbat services, which begin early in the morning and may last for several hours. The Torah is taken out of the Ark or the Aron HaKadosh and processed around the synagogue. before being taken to the bema to be read. And the same portion of the Torah is read in every synagogue all over the world on the Shabbat. So all Jews are unified in this kind of aspect of their worship. Now, Shabbat ends at sundown on Saturday evening when 3 stars appear in the sky. And there's a special ceremony to demark the end of Shabbat called Havdalah. That's spelled Havdalah, and I probably pronounced it wrong, so I do apologise. And this means separation or division. And this recognises the difference between the sacred time of Shabbat and the start of a new week. And during this time, some blessings are recited over some wine, spices and candles are lit. This is the spices of the idea of the uplifting week to come. Lighting the candles as a sign of work returning to life, and the end of the Shabbat. Now, the Shabbat is really important to Jews because one of the main purposes of the Jews is to fulfill God's rules, the mitzvot, in order to heal the world, which is called Tikkun Olam. And many Jews see the Shabbat as an example of what the perfect healed world will be like. Spending time with loved ones, spending time with family, not stressed out by work, and thinking about God and God in their lives. And so Shabbat is like a tiny slice of the healed world of Tikkun Olam. And so it's really important for that reason. Of course, it is one of the 10 commandments, so one of the mitzvot that all Jews are expected to follow, and Reform and Orthodox Jews will both honour that. And it is part of that physical agreement or covenant that Moses made with God. I think that's all I want to say about the Shabbat. If you've got any comments, please leave them below. And the next tutorial will be coming soon. Okay, hope you're keeping safe and healthy, and I look forward to seeing you when I do. Take care.